After 50 years away, I'm back to the gorgeous city of Kiev. It's so thrilling to walk along the streets my parents walked and see the city we left during the war in '42. I have chosen to live for the last 35 years in San Francisco. And 17 of those years, I've worked with the San Francisco Opera Shop. Opera music has given me so much inspiration.
What do art and jewelry have in common? Well, if you're Masha Archer, they have everything in common. Now, her jewelry is an exotic blend of the old and new, usually beginning with a central piece or object that could be a sculpture or a very special find as inspiration, and then she uses ropes of beads, assembles them in such a way as to respond to the movement of the body. The jewelry actually becomes an extension of the personality of the person wearing it. Can I tell one more little story? Yes. I then went to an Arabian horse show and saw this incredible piece of jewelry to purchase with something of mine. I bought it, went to the opera months and months later, saw your collection there, turned to a friend of mine and said, I have a piece of jewelry by this artist, at which you, the artist, came around from behind the counter and said, well, you couldn't have. And totally ignoring you, I turned back to my girlfriend and said, well, regardless of what she says, I do have a piece. And you said, but you couldn't unless your name is Margaret Lesher. So I bought your second piece in Scottsdale, Arizona, never met you, and once I met you, now look what I've done.
I seem to have synthesized my Slavic origins with the opera and my life in America. Samuel Ramey was among the singers that performed in his house and supported it with lending me his person.
This handsome body.
To adorn his person and his presence.
From the time that I've seen your work, I would classify it as very operatic. It has that kind of the grandeur and the largeness, and the colors are very, very strong. The only way I can describe it is operatic.
I just stuck to the opera house because this is where I was living the visual life that I was working with. Placido requested that I photograph him in, as he said, very impressive pieces. I treasure this recollection. I see melodies and repetitions of themes in these pieces, and I work to achieve certain harmonies and rhythms in them, so I'm at home with the idea of motion and music in these visual pieces. My whole family comes from Kiev. I was born in Kiev. My parents were both artists. My father a sculptor and my mother a painter. They're Mykola and Sofia Muchin.
He was a witty and a cheerful man. He loved his friends very dearly. Kiev and Lviv were bombed. He was a prisoner, and he prepared his escape. He was saved by Americans. It helped that he had 2 passports.
Nikolai Muchin graduated from the Kiev and Kharkov academies in the 30s. I remember that he was always interested in epic and monumental subjects. He used the image of the horse to suggest space, the vastness and freedom of the steppes. The poetry of Shevchenko was his special love. My mother's influence is more mysterious and more abstract because my mother transmitted to me very, very ephemeral and equivocal ideas of color. That there is no such thing as a color that's beautiful or a color that's ugly, but rather that colors are to be heard in groups as a melody.
and the same notes, the same colors combined differently and recombined perpetually and differently with each other produce entirely different music. The idea is that if it's beautiful, even if it's dull, which sometimes beautiful things are dull, even if it's dull and quiet, I can, by combining it with something interesting, ignite that beauty so that it not only has the power of beauty, but suddenly also has the power of its excitement as well. And the same for something ugly that's interesting. It may be just ugly, but I see the possibility of making an introduction of this ugly thing to something beautiful and suddenly making it very interesting, and then the whole thing again begins to move. This carving of my father's, which is called Hajuchka, which means little snake in Ukrainian. This is carved from Carrara marble, in which I posed for in 1953. This is the basis for this design, which I had done in China. I trained a sculptor in China to do this.
Нет хода никому. Я знаю, у красотки и сторож крыльца, никто не загородит.
The gowns are yours also. So did you talk about that?
Yes, I did do clothing design, and my jewelry design and my clothing design and my painting are really all the same thing. And I wanted to point out that each one of these forms is an extension of my original impulse to decorate the body and to make it live with its decoration.
So you wanted to have living art?
Yes, that can be
wearable
worn.
art.
Wearable art.
Wearable art.
So that it can be displayed on the wall in a case when not worn, and then worn wherever you are going.
So with my collection, I can go over to the display cabinet, take out the piece I want, wear it, and bring it back, and
then you have this beautiful object of art in your home, not in a drawer, not hidden, but displayed with your collection of paintings and sculpture.
We lived in San Francisco on Minna Alley for 21 years down the street from Benny Bufano's studio. We were rapacious collectors of everything: carpets, paintings, icons, books, Art Nouveau. I was married to Charles Archer, a Black Mountain artist and photographer. Charles has been described as a photographer in the grand tradition. He saw himself as a photographer of women. Yes, he shot many other subjects, but it was in photographing women that he was able to bring to his theme his reverence, his joy, and his sadness, and for what he felt was the majesty, the beauty, and the eternal gallantry and heroism of women. My interest in belly dancing started in the New York clubs in the 50s. For me, belly dancing was an extension of life drawing and the basis of my ideas of moving sculptural composition. That's why costuming and the mechanics of dance jewelry became so important in my company, the San Francisco Classic Dance Troupe. I directed this group for 15 years and was the first to bring this dance to Hong Kong, China, and Morocco in the 80s. In the 70s and 80s, we performed our Parisian Tunisian style in Europe. Charles liked to photograph our modern belly dance in classical environments. The Palace of Fine Arts was a favorite site, and we all considered it our place. I do trunk shows for Saks Fifth Avenue all over the country, but I especially like to show in Florida. The Florida customers say yes to the big statement. I use in my work materials such as pearls, jade, coral, Baltic amber, turquoise, old African trade beads, metals, horn. The Florida customer loves color and gives me the opportunity to express my color concepts on a larger canvas. All materials are paint to me, and if pressed to explain the origins of my ideas, I suppose anything I've ever seen and loved is still within me. The 60s in San Francisco were the most 60-ish of all places. This was the epicenter of all that appetite for freedom, for generosity, and for color, to let it be. By the 70s, there was an art-to-wear category in many fine art museums. I was always interested in using dancers as models. A dancer always has wonderful placement of the head, neck, and shoulders, and knows exactly how to hold the back. Of course, these are very telling and evocative display areas for my jewelry. Charles especially liked to style the back. 20th century artists, including Man Ray, developed the idea of the female body as a string instrument, both in its attenuated sound and womanly configuration. I was so lucky to meet and know Olga Borodina, Elena Zaremba, and Marina Domoshenko, leading voices of the Russian opera scene. I so hate traveling by now. It is so much work. Plus, I always lose my passports, my credit cards, visas. It's so difficult, but it looks like I cannot live without doing it. I always loved and hated Russia. I finally went there with my exhibit several times, starting in '97. Working with major stores like Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus has enabled me to keep working without stopping for a quarter of a century. It is very supportive and encouraging to know that my collector is there and has always been there. For 20 years now, I have been living and working in 2 little apartments on the top floor of a small Victorian building in Hayes Valley, 2 blocks behind the Opera House. The plan was to live in one and work in the other, but I seem to be working everywhere, every room, every corridor, every stairwell. In the tradition of my parents and all Slavic artists I've ever known, I have filled every inch of my space with my treasured finds and classical music.
That's for a shoot?
When I'm developing an idea, I pull what I need from my extensive library of available materials. I don't want to have to buy or order anything mid-stride. Speaking of artists and houses and how life and art intertwine, this is my parents' house in Philadelphia and my father's carriage house, Atelier. Since his death in 1962, his granite blocks have remained untouched.
He was very, very kind, very gentle, very subtle, easygoing, happy, and on the other hand, it seemed like everybody that reacted to him in the opposite extreme. They always prodded him. They seemed like, when I was very young. Well, I fell in love with his daughter. That was easy. It was difficult, but it was easy. It was just kid stuff. Stone was special because it's a different approach entirely. You have a piece of stone and you want to get something out of it, and you approach it entirely differently from anything else. And his philosophy was that you feel it through until you become almost part of it, that you have to feel that strongly, and then you attack it.
When you immigrate from the Soviet Union, it's a completely different story than if you come from Germany, France, or any other country you could have gone home to. The dream of so many of them was to return and bring their art back with them. Sergei Bongard sent quite a few of his works back to Kiev. Volodya Shatalov also sent works. They never thought that it would happen within their lifetimes. There would be a free Russia or free Ukraine. Lukin doesn't know that his works are now back there.
Sculptor Pyotr Kapshuchenko remembers that Nikolai Mukhin was admired for his brilliant technique and loved as a very kind person. He was buried in a historic Ukrainian cemetery in Bound Brook, New Jersey. Kapshuchenko found inspiration for his work in Ukrainian history and immortalized the victims of the famine of 1933.
Masha потрапила до Сполучених Штатів Америки.
Art historian Irina Blumina wrote about my parents' work. She is right in saying that I grew up abroad and did not really know Ukraine, but always wanted to go back there. Finally, I made it to Kiev for my exhibit. At that time, I found the family of my father's brother, sculptor Viktor Mukhin.
Зокрема, рідного брата Миколи Мухіна, Віктора Мухіна.
In this quiet moment in the Pecherska Lavra, I think about my family's history. My paternal great-grandfather was a member of the Russian nobility, who was exiled to the coal mines of Donbass for his participation in the Decembrist revolt of 1814 in St. Petersburg.
One of the greatest joys is when a theater director meets an artist capable of thinking with such finesse, harmony, sophistication, and still knowledge of theater as if on a different plane. But this other plane is the same theater yet, because today's theater consists of fine facets which either harmoniously fit or they create dissonance. Both form and materials and artists' keenness of feeling are of importance. It is very important how all the details work together. Therefore, I believe we deal with reflection of the universe here. There is something significant in this work which unites us together. Only a person who so finely feels the harmony of the earth and the heavens can so wonderfully create these amazing theatrical compositions.
Может так тонко, неожиданно и согласованно, гармонично составить эти удивительные театральные композиции.
The meter of the heart and the ritual of the eye, the benediction in comprehension that elevates the soul from the coarse confinement of torpid dialogue and base design.
I've always wanted to combine as many things as possible together and make them appear to be very natural in their combination, and never to seem to have overwhelmed themselves so that it's impossible to see the design. And I think I've done that I've managed to combine a lot together, and it's all visible and clear and united and even somewhat simple. But when I get a chance to put two sitters together like this, both of them dressed in my design ideas and looking as normal and as natural and as unforced as they do, I really feel vindicated that I'm on the right track, that I've always been right in pursuing this direction. These are wonderful tribal silver artifacts from different countries in the East and Middle East and Near East. These are Tibetan, Afghani, most of the rings are Tibetan.
And Masha was always my ideal of a sparkling artist, kaleidoscope, because she could paint in any style, and she had her lessons at the studio, where there were some very fine artists who taught the young people, but I think it came out of her genes actually, from the family. She was very talented, her style changed with her whim, and I enjoyed watching her paint because she was totally engrossed in what she was doing and happy. She was very fond of variety in her life. She did these Renaissance dresses, outfit, and now she does that fantastic jewelry. At the beginning, she loved landscapes, and a very fine portraitist she is. She captured the essence of the person. Even if the person sometimes was not pleased with the likeness, as my sister was not quite happy about it, she thought, am I really so harsh, so puritanical? It was a beautiful summer night, and Masha and her friend and I and my husband were enjoying everything, the soft air, and especially Masha painting away. The fireflies were out already, night was falling.
My work really is an outgrowth of what I've learned from them. My talent is mine, but it's their background and their education and their teaching of me that has produced this synthesis of color and hard materials and design. I incorporate his love for combinations of handsome, permanent materials and his sweeping, fearless design ideas. The humor and the wit and the elegance, these are things that I saw in his sculpture, and I felt that they were mine as well.
Святе місце, святе для кожного українця і для тебе, тому що ти українка, справжня українка, і що ти привезла сюди свою доню, своє майбутнє, тим більше, що Маша, дочка знаменитого скульптора Миколи Мухіна, який вчився до війни колись іще з Тетяною Яблонською на одному курсі. Мухін, роботи, коли я побачила вперше, ви знаєте, настільки вражена експресією, динамікою і любов'ю до рідного краю, любов'ю до України.
While in detention by the Soviets in East Germany, my father was commissioned to do 3 monuments to the fallen Allies. The Red Army Soldier Monument in Hanover, the Weeping Woman, and the Dakhadyaga, which means a person near death from starvation, installed in Bergen-Belsen.
Посадили над козаком явір та ялину, а в головах у дівчини червону калину. Прилітає зозуленька над ними кувати, прилітає соловейко щоніч щебетати. Якби знала, не ходила б пізно за водою, не стояла б до півночі з милим під водою. Якби знала, і то лихо попереду знати, що нам в світі зустрінеться. Не знайте, дівчата, не питайте свою долю. Само серце знає, кого любить. Нехай в'яне, поки закопають, бо недовго чорнобриві карі оченята, біле личко червоніє. Недовго, дівчата, дополуть, та й зав'яне, брови полиняють. Кохайтеся, любітеся, як серденько знає.
Throughout the years of my life, I've had the privilege of working with the most wonderful and beautiful people. I hope that I've been able to express my love and gratitude to them with what I have created.
Овочку шаєє на готу. the boy.